presentation.
Father, we thank you for the privilege of being here today, living in this country. Lord, we thank you for your hand that's upon us. Ask your blessing on this meeting tonight, on every decision, everything that's done. We pray for your glory in Jesus' name. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Any changes to the agenda?
We do need to add one executive session. It will be for discussion for preliminary acquisition of real estate, about 20 minutes. I believe that's on your motion sheet.
Okay. I would move to approve the agenda as amended.
Second.
I have a motion from Chuck and a second from Marcia. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Public comments. This is a time where citizens are encouraged to speak publicly. Request that you state your name and address, speak respectfully, and limit your comments to 3 minutes. Any public comments? No public comments. Proclamations. Rotary International Proclamation.
Mayor and Commissioners, Teresa Bonebrink is our president for our local chapter of our Rotary International Club, and our very own Concordia's Daniel Brewer is our district governor, and he wasn't able to be here tonight, so I'm going to say a few words that he had, and then Teresa's going to share a little bit about one of our mission projects. And Dana was sorry for not being able to be here tonight. He wanted to let you know that eradication of polio, which is a primary purpose of Rodeo International, is something that he is very passionate as working toward as district governor for Kansas and Oklahoma, District 5680. Both of his parents struggled to overcome the disease's challenging effects. Paralyzing cases of polio per year have been reduced over 99% since the early 1990s when Rotary International volunteers took on the disease. They were later joined by the World Health Organization and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. When Rotary started, on average, there were nearly 1,000 people around the world paralyzed by the effects of polio each and every day, which is 353,000 cases per year. We're down to only 2 countries in the world with wild polio virus cases in Pakistan and Afghanistan, and we must not quit until it no longer has human host to perpetuate its existence. Polio is very important to Rotary.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about the Purple Pinky Project. It started out as a campaign to end polio now. Polio has no cure, but it's very preventable by vaccine. Why do we call it the Purple Pinky Project? When a child is vaccinated, a purple stamp is placed on their little finger. With Rotary's local club program, the 3rd graders are educated about polio and then asked to bring just $1 to help end polio. As they bring their dollar up to the table to contribute to the fund, each child's pinky is colored with a purple dot to represent a child whose life they may be saving or changing with that $1 bill. It's a very powerful way to remember the effect of vaccine, and they feel like they've really truly made a difference. It's a very important thing for our club. We donate on a weekly basis and contribute to Polio Plus for the Rotary International Club.
Thank you.
Tonight we asked the Mayor and Commissioners to go ahead and read the proclamation for World Polio Day for October 24th and celebrate with us. We have several members of our local Rotary chapter here in support of this proclamation.
Okay. Thank you. I'll read the proclamation. Rotary International Proclamation. Whereas Rotary is a global network of 1.2 million neighbors, friends, leaders, and problem solvers who unite and take action to create lasting change in communities across the globe. And whereas the Rotary motto, service above self, inspires members to provide humanitarian service, follow high ethical standards, and promote goodwill and peace in the world. And whereas Rotary in 1985 launched Polio Plus, and in 1988 helped establish the Global Polio Eradication Initiative, which today includes the World Health Organization, U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, UNICEF, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to immunize the children of the world against polio. And whereas polio cases have dropped by 99.9% since 1988, and the world stands on the threshold of eradicating the disease. And whereas to date, Rotary has contributed more than 1.9 billion dollars and countless volunteer hours to protecting more than 2.5 billion children in 122 countries. And whereas Rotary is working to raise an additional $50 million per year, which would be leveraged for maximum impact by an additional $100 million annually from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. And whereas their efforts are providing much needed operational support, medical staff, laboratory equipment, and educational materials for health workers and parents. And whereas in addition, Rotary has played a major role in decisions by donor governments to contribute more than $8 billion to the effort. And whereas there are over 4,500 Rotary members in more than 104 clubs throughout Kansas that sponsor service projects to address such critical issues as poverty, disease, hunger, illiteracy, and the environment in their local communities and abroad. Therefore, I, Mark R. Matthew, Mayor of the City of Concordia, do hereby proclaim October 24th World Polio Day and encourage all citizens to join me and Rotary International in the fight for a polio-free world. Thank you. Dr. Nelson, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Thank
Welcome.
you. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. I was out of town and got a call just about 15 minutes ago saying you were going to be talking about World Polio Day. I don't know if any of you have heard about Rotary's Purple Pinky Project. Purple Pinky Project, talking about a pinky on little children that get painted purple. It is really a program to help them understand what polio is and has been in the past. It was in 1980 when Rotary International formed a partnership with the World Health Organization, the Centers for Disease Control, and UNICEF, with the goal of eradicating polio from the world. At that time, there were approximately 350,000 cases of polio being reported in the world every year in 125 countries throughout the world. This has been done by giving oral polio vaccine to hundreds of thousands of children during immunization days in order to keep track of which children have had the vaccine at the time when the drops are given to them orally by mouth. The little child's little finger is painted purple. There are so many thousands of these children showing up at these immunization clinics that they had no way of keeping track of who has had the vaccine and who hasn't. So by painting their little fingers purple, the immunization workers could understand then who has had the vaccine and who has not. In order to help children locally here and to understand what polio is, an educational program called Purple Pinky Project was started in Concordia. In Concordia, this consisted first of the third grade teachers reading a story to the children called First Steps. This is a story about a child who had polio and all the trials that he went through. This is, we asked the children to each bring $1 and put that $1 in a container as they come through the line and get their little fingers painted purple. That $1 has helped to immunize more children in the world. We have also had help from the banks and other community organizations who helped to support this. Rotary's program to eradicate polio in the world has been very successful. At the time when I wrote this little paper, there were only 3 countries left in the whole world that were still reporting polio out of about 150 when they started back in the 1980s. We have a good friend, Reverend Jim Frederickson, who was born and raised around Cortland, Kansas. When he was about a sophomore in high school, he was driving a tractor for his dad when he realized he couldn't push the clutch down anymore. So he went home and he was going upstairs to the bedroom where he slept, and he couldn't climb the stairs. And he knew something was wrong. He went to bed. The next day, he couldn't get out of bed. He saw local doctors here and then was sent to Salina to see a specialist because he had contracted polio. He has been a real help. He has come and told his story to these 3rd graders each year and helped them to understand what polio really was in those days. At the time when I wrote this, there were just 3 countries in the whole world left: Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria, where polio has never been stopped. Well, Nigeria has been stopped now, so there are really only Pakistan and Afghanistan that are reporting this. There are other countries where polio has and shows up, and so the contribution from Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has been a real help to support Rotary's polio program. These contributions that they give and that the children give and organizations in our community give help to buy this vaccine and support these immunization clinics around the world. There are still some big hurdles to get over, but we're getting closer to that goal of Rotary, which is no more polio in the world. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Thank you. Discussion agenda, animal control ordinance update.
Mayor and Commissioners, good evening. I wanted to give you guys an update and maybe have a little discussion here, and really and truly I'd like some direction from the commission as well. So not too terribly long ago, we went ahead and did away with the breed-specific ordinances here in Concordia. There's a memo in your packet that I drafted with some of the concerns that I have right now that I'm seeing. When we went from this, when we went away from the breed-specific ordinances, you guys had said, hey, we're going to expect from municipal court and law enforcement and animal control that the ordinances are enforced. What the goal was to shift that burden from what breed of dog it is to essentially the type of owner, really. We wanted to hold those people accountable for what was taking place. For the most part, we've been successful. We have had occasions where people it's been bad enough that not only has the animal been taken, but we've had owners that have been, the judges ordered them to no longer even be allowed to have animals within the city limits. That actually is a very beneficial and strong tool because in some instances we'll get people to kind of get it together, but in other instances it will take a bad owner and not allow them to have animals anymore. It's not always a fun situation to deal with, but it's one that we've had to deal with. So with that being said, we do have some issues that have come up, room for improvement, which I knew was going to take place as we were going through this. We have lately had an uptick in animal control issues, especially within the last couple of months. Notably, you'll see in your memo, the first thing is in regard to dog bites. We are seeing an increase in dog bites. What generally happens in those situations is the dog will, law enforcement will be called. When I say law enforcement, usually it's animal control is called. The big problem we have, the problem I'm seeing at this time, is that when a dog bites, it's supposed to be quarantined. Cities that I previously, lived in or have had as advised when I worked at the previous insurance company, when animals bit, they were quarantined and they were quarantined at a shelter. The problem we have here is that generally we are allowing those dogs to quarantine at home. That's just simply not working, and it's not working at all. I do understand that there's a possibility that we could have our shelter fill up rather quickly. I do also understand that there is a price that is paid every single day when animals are taken to the shelter. I have worked with law enforcement, with animal control, with Megan, which I have to, on a side note, give Megan Murdoch kudos because she is generally the front line for a lot of this stuff. They don't have my cell phone number, so they call here and they want to talk to me, or they want to be angry, and she is the person that catches it. And Megan does a wonderful job of dealing with those folks and passing them along to me, letting me know what's going on. So she's not here, but I want everyone to know how much I appreciate the work that she puts in and a lot of the flack that she catches from people. And in some instances, she's been thrown under the bus by folks as well, and she handles that with a lot of grace. The problem is, and what we had talked about was potentially looking at a situation where we would have a reduced rate if those dogs had to be quarantined. We would have like a quarantine rate or something like that, so people could essentially. We don't want to quarantine an animal and then have the issue be resolved, but not have them be able to afford to pay the shelter fee and get the dog out. But just this quarantining at home is not working. We are seeing it time and time again. We've had situations where animals were supposed to have been quarantined for 14 days. They weren't quarantined for 14 days and they bit somebody again. Animals supposed to be inside under the care of others, under the care of people not in contact with other individuals outside. They're running all over the place. And that is not the dog's fault. That is the owner's fault. So I am requesting, I guess, or suggesting that we do amend our ordinance to deal with dog bites. There's nothing in the ordinance that deals with the quarantining of animals after they've bitten. Especially, and we can kind of do this one of two ways. We can just flat out do a dog bite period. If a dog bites another animal, bites a kid, and a human, and it's reported, the dog has to quarantine and it must quarantine at the shelter. We could also differentiate and say, hey, if it's, because, even I have two dogs, they've bit each other before. Okay, I'm not going to quarantine the bulldog because the husky tried to eat its food and bit its leg. But when it bites a human being, I think for sure we need to be quarantining those dogs at the shelter so that they can be watched over. We have to make sure these dogs are not diseased, do not have rabies, etc. Okay. So I don't know if you guys want to discuss that and we then move on to the next issue I have, or if you want me to finish all this up and then we can discuss.
I want to ask a question.
Sure.
The dogs that are biting, are they licensed?
It depends. Generally, I would say the situations we've been dealing with lately, I think they have been,
Okay,
yes.
so there's already been proof that they were immunized.
Well, no, not necessarily, because what happens is in those situations, they could be registered, but then that rabies shot could run out during the course of that year.
Okay.
So we always have to ask if they have their rabies shot. And in general, a lot of the times too, in these situations, like for example, Topeka, when I lived there, I volunteered at the shelter. And of course, they had a much bigger shelter, but they had a lot of animals that were in quarantine, but they also were there for evidence of, a crime. If they bit a human, then they had to be taken there because they were going to potentially be used as evidence, if somebody was charged with something as well. What I'm seeing though, really and truly is that dogs are biting. Law enforcement is just kind of okay, you can quarantine at home. And like I said, when I say law enforcement, I'm talking animal control, everybody. And they're, okay, we understand you can just quarantine at home, please watch over it. And it's just not taking place. So at the very least, I would request that we have some kind of a quarantine period at the shelter. I can even check, Megan and I were discussing if it has to be a 14-day quarantine or if it can be less, and that's probably something we need to talk to the vet about as well. But at the very least, I would request that we have some kind of a mandatory quarantine, that I could create an ordinance that would actually be a city ordinance to follow in the event that an animal bit someone in the city. It's just, it is becoming an issue. I don't know what's going on and why all of a sudden these have flared up, but they have. I would say the bulk of the docket right now, municipal court, are driving while suspended and animal control issues. So
I have a couple of questions. First of all, what's the fee per day at the animal shelter?
it is, does anybody remember?
50 the first day
50
and $25 a day.
25 the next day, yeah.
Okay.
So we were talking
So
about
that-
maybe some type of a flat rate where it would still cover basically being able to shelter the animal and feed it, but it's not going to be a prohibitive amount. So where somebody, if something was resolved or the animal didn't need, we didn't have to do something with the animal, then those folks can afford to get that animal back, because it can become, very expensive very quickly.
So another question, have most of the bites been breed specific?
They have not. No, they have not. Believe it or not, none of them have been pit bull. There have been, we had a couple, I think we had Chihuahuas, boxers, some mutts. There was a dog, it was a bird dog, I believe. It got into the neighbor's place and ate a rabbit. Some of them are fun.
Since we've changed this, how many dogs are we talking that we could be seeing go into the pound? I mean, is it an overwhelming number to where we need to think ahead and find out how we can house the rest
At
of
this
them?
point in time, it's not an overwhelming number. However, we have had an uptick. If we had that situation right now, off the top of my head, having just had municipal courts, we would be looking at least within the last month, probably 4 dogs. But that would also depend on how we treat it. If we treat it just human, potentially 2 or 3. We had one that did kill a rabbit. I don't think we necessarily need to quarantine a bird dog that eats a rabbit. Yes, they will be written a ticket and they will show up, and we've dealt with that, but that's more of could probably be treated in a different
It
way.
would need to be sent off to the pound to quarantine for that purpose, or
We don't, that's kind of what we need to decide. We don't necessarily, with another animal, that can be, we could do that as, a lot of the times it can be, discretionary, So if this animal is frothing at the mouth and has killed, an entire litter of kittens, well, maybe we should quarantine it. But if it got in the neighbor's yard and got a hold of their chicken, well, I've had my chickens eaten by dogs before too. So they weren't, it was just a bird and a dog. So the seriousness comes with, and I will note too, the animal to human bites that we've had lately have been very serious. These are not nips. These are good sized dogs getting a hold of other people.
They require medical care.
They should have, yes, but those folks decided not to. Well, one did seek medical care, insurance covered it, and I don't know what insurance will be doing. And the other one decided not to, and he probably should have. Not a doctor, but I can look at things, so.
So are we talking about a bite that breaks the skin? I mean, sometimes little dogs will come up and pinch you or
Yeah.
grab your leg or your pants or something like that and then run off.
Yeah, for sure, a bite that would break the skin should be, absolutely, because then you do, in the event that there's something going on with that animal, you do now have that contact. It's entered your bloodstream or at least into your tissue, so that's where you could have an issue. You know, if the neighbor's Pomeranian, you know, nips at me and gets the back of my pants, and no, it doesn't necessarily need to be quarantined. And maybe that's something that we could spell out in the ordinance as well. You know, a bite that potentially breaks skin, or we can find some kind of a definition to differentiate that. I have no problem differentiating between certain situations.
As a point of clarification, when we're talking about quarantine, that's specifically to make sure that the dog is, for other words, healthy.
Yes.
We're not really addressing behavioral issues.
Well, no, I
Okay.
don't really know if we have the capability to do that. I mean, now here's the thing: if we quarantine them, we could potentially see behavioral issues. That has happened before.
And maybe that's, having read this and having talked with people, you know, I guess there are several issues that I think we need to address or have the opportunity to improve. And certainly there's the quarantining when the dog actively bites another, to make sure that that's healthy or there's not concern for rabies. I think we also need to address behavioral issues because, okay, that Pomeranian comes after me, not going to do much damage, but there's a disturbance there that, you know, could affect people's comfort of living, right? I would absolutely respect people's rights, except for when those rights infringe upon my rights.
Yeah.
And so I don't
And we've
know.
actually, not to interrupt, we've actually addressed those issues through, so if that Pomeranian did that, that person may not get a ticket for a potentially dangerous animal. They are going to get a ticket for a dog at large. So we can address it that way as well. And we've been very clear in municipal court with folks that, listen, we expect you to be responsible. We expect you to take the steps that we are asking you to do. And most of the time people are like, yeah, sure, we'll do it. What happens is the follow through. And that's where these things are becoming an issue. It's like, yeah, I'll make sure the dog's okay. I'll quarantine it, or I'll put this up, or I'll get this restraint, or I'll make sure the dog's not outside all the time, or it's not being neglected. And I would tell you, 9 out of 10 times they are not. I mean, if they make it that far and they're having a ticket written, they're not following through with the remedial measures that we're giving them. And that's why we're now getting to a point where I'm having to ask a municipal judge on different occasions to not only take the animal, but then to order that these folks cannot have another animal within the city limits.
You know, so maybe we want to address point by point. I'm not trying to undo the conversation. We're just going to stick with quarantining we can. And I think there is a conversation to have about how do we address the overall issues when they're not being, how many cases are I guess I know personally of several cases that have had concerns expressed. Those people have made calls to have those concerns addressed. The concerns were not addressed. So I'm wondering, I mean, we can talk about everything we found out in municipal court and how to address that. How do we work our program, our ordinances such that we are addressing the root issue instead of a lot of these kind of after the fact anecdotal incidences that may or may not.
So that's kind of twofold. The beginning where you're talking about reports where people getting in contact and feeling like nothing has been done or it's not being addressed. That is currently being addressed as well because we recognize that. And Rick and I have been in contact on how can we do this a little better. And we've taken some measures already. For example, animal control now has a body cam. Which is very helpful for me when I have defendants come in, they're like, my dog would never do that, and I never said this, and then I'm like, well, I have it all on video. So that has been helpful because we've had situations where people have said, well, you know, they said that they would do this or they would do that, and so I need to go back and review that video, or it would have been helpful for me to have been able to review that video at that time, but we maybe didn't have a camera at that time. Okay. So law enforcement's been the chief has been very receptive to meeting with me, meeting with Amy, going through these things and talking about them and what can we do to better improve that stuff. when it comes to addressing the issues before it becomes an issue, some of that is a crystal ball, we don't know. Some of it we do. For example, we've had some just flat out neglect cases, okay? And thankfully we have citizens who will address those. So they will report them and then we can go out there and check those out. And we've had those situations. And those situations thankfully have been, we've been able to remedy, prosecute, get those animals into safe places. Most of the neglect cases that we've had have, I'd say 90% of them at least, have resulted in the animal being removed from the care of the owner, because sometimes what we will do in certain situations, we've had some extreme situations, but in certain situations I'll give them, and Megan knows a lot about dogs, she had trained them and that kind of stuff, so she can assist me, and here's a good way to, some remedial measures these folks can take to prove to us that maybe this dog is just skinny or whatever it may be. Most of the time they don't follow through, so that's then indicative to us that this isn't a dog issue, this is an owner issue, and like I said, 9 out of 10 times it's an owner issue anyway, and so we can get those dogs out. We've got other things that need to be addressed that will give us some foresight, or so that we can say, okay, we see this as a potential issue down the road, so how can we fix this? That's actually kind of the next thing we get to talk about. But I wanted to kind of give you guys an update, let you know that we are able to do these things. We are enforcing these things. We are thankfully, and most of the time these things end up, if not, settled right before trial, will go to trial, because these folks are, that's their animal. A lot of times they care about it and they're going to fight tooth and nail, which they have every right to do. And so we're always pretty prepared for that.
So
Very prepared.
what makes us think that if we charge a lesser fee at the shelter, that it's going to give people an incentive to actually take
Care
of their animal?
Well,
I mean, if I knew, I mean, maybe I couldn't get my animal back, but then you don't deserve that animal.
well, that's a very good point. I was just looking at it from a standpoint of, we didn't want a shelter full of dogs that have bit, for example, that maybe they did, take those remedial measures and then like, well, I can't afford to get the dog out now. Because, maybe they have, maybe there's some financial issues. We can look at that on a case-by-case basis, and we have actually had to do that. So, maybe we do look at it as, you're gonna be charged that regular rate, and then if it's a situation where it was a misunderstanding, the dog didn't actually, whatever it may be, then we can adjust that. We've had to do that before. We honestly have. We've had times where we're like, okay, we'll cut in half the amount that is owed to the shelter, which the shelter isn't always necessarily thrilled with, I would imagine, but we've had to do that in the past. So that, that's something, we don't do it very often, because a lot of times, I want these folks to understand this is not okay. So this is gonna hurt you emotionally, because your dog's gonna be taken away, but it's also gonna hurt you financially. So it gives them some incentive to actually take some initiative to be a good dog owner, a pet owner. Just unfortunately, like I said, once it gets to in here on a Monday, we're kind of far past that. So, maybe it is something we look at where we just charge that rate, and then we have to deal with that on a case-by-case basis, so.
I think that the two issues that we've got another one to discuss here. I think that we might be better served having us getting the information, people kind of process it, put their thoughts together, whatever, and I think we're probably going to have a study session to discuss it, because I don't think we're going to solve anything here tonight.
Okay.
But I certainly appreciate all the information, but I think we should move on to the fostering of animals. And unless you have some more to say about it.
No, that's fine. And if we want to do a study session, we can do that in the very near future. The reason why I bring it to you, and kind of the way I had formatted this was, give me some feedback, let me get this done and bring it to you next meeting, is these things have become an issue, and they've become an issue that we need to address in the very near future, I would prefer. So if we need to have a study session, totally fine. I'll make you a PowerPoint and we can go over all that stuff and discuss it. That's no problem there.
There's a lot of different angles to this. So
I think we should probably do it at our next meeting.
Okay.
Study session.
A good plan to take action to follow.
Right.
Okay. That's fine, we can totally do that. Okay, so then I can kind of make this a little shorter and sweeter, and we can get a little bit more in depth with it at the study session. But another issue that we're having that is, you know, when we have these things and we change things, sometimes we have some unforeseen, I don't want to say consequences, but complications maybe is better. What has become an issue is within the city is the fostering of animals, okay? Because we don't have a limit on the amount of animals you can have within the city. And so what ends up happening a lot of the times is that these folks will start fostering animals and it's getting out of control. There is a set of regulations that govern the fostering of animals. It's the Kansas Animal Pet Control Act. And I know more about that than I prefer at this point in time, but I know a lot about Pet Act stuff. What happens in these situations is there's certain things that they have to do. So they have to foster, they have to have a fostering agreement with a licensed shelter or kennel through the state, and they have to have a veterinary plan, and I think they can, allegedly they can only have a certain amount of dogs, those dogs must be fixed, etc. What we're running into is though, we have these regulations and they're more of a top-down look. So we've got all this, okay, you're licensed, you've got this, cool, go foster your animals. Once they kind of get here, there's no more oversight. So a lot of complaints have been lodged by citizens. I actually had to do an investigation into some things. What we're running into is large amounts of animals, they're fighting, massive amounts of fecal matter that are now, essentially what is happening is that these animals, we have a large amount of animals in a confined space. Those animals then are, with the fighting, the barking, the fecal matter, they are now interfering with the other people in the neighborhood's enjoyment of their home and their ability to be outside. I would imagine when it rains, there's probably some runoff from that. The city, in one particular instance, has been called on quite a few occasions. To be perfectly honest with you, and I'm okay saying this, I think there's neglect issues when it comes to this place. Because once they get there, nobody's really visiting, nobody's seeing what's going on. So I don't want us, and I feel like I always have to preface these things when I'm trying to enforce stuff as, I'm an animal lover, and I have 2 dogs, love them to death. But I think there reaches a point where we have to say, okay, we're gonna have to regulate this in some shape or form.
Well, I think because I think the majority of us are animal lovers, that it's important for us to not let this be an issue.
Yes.
You know, I love kids, that's why I don't want to be.
Yeah.
I love kids, that's why I want them not left outside.
Yeah, exactly. That's why I don't drive over them. So what I would suggest when it comes to this, just kind of as we move through here, is that it has risen to a point where we need to take some type of action. It has been bounced around. I've talked to Megan about it, is how do we do this? Really, we look at 1 of 2 options. Either we take the approach of, you know what, we just don't want that in our community. That's happened before in places. So you read specific ordinances. We got all types of things. Some cities limit the amount of dogs you can have. Or we look at a situation where we go, okay, if we can have some control and oversight over this, maybe we can get this taken care of. So with looking at that kind of approach, we should have, I would propose in that kind of a situation, which we can go more in depth at a study session, is the local licensing ordinance, where we would do, and we've been looking at trying to get information from other communities, and they have something like this, where essentially you have to license, just like you have to have a tag for your dog, which we have issues with that too. These dogs are coming in and out. We don't know what's there. We don't know what the issues are. They're not being tagged within the city. So you would have to essentially be licensed through us as well, where we would set up parameters, perhaps for the size of yard and the number of dogs allowed to be fostered, home inspections to make sure animals are being taken care of, fed, and not neglected, registering of all those animals when they come in possession of the foster home. I say within 4 days, 5 days, calendar days of 2 days. It's not that difficult to get down here and let them know. And we can set up a different version of that too, where it's, okay, I have this dog, I don't know how long it'll be here, let me license it, however much it may be. We can build something through this licensing program. I do believe there should be an annual fee to do this. To be honest with you, I just don't think anybody off the street should be able to say, I'm gonna foster, Chihuahuas now, and I'm good to go. Like, I think there should be, if you're gonna invest your time and effort into this, you should invest a little bit of that money in there, because with an annual fee, somebody's gonna have to do this. I am not volunteering to. Somebody else is gonna have to do this. So law enforcement, somebody, I would assume maybe someone within animal control, somebody's gonna have to do this, okay? So somebody at the city level is gonna have to do the licensing, making sure everything is permitted correctly. Somebody's gonna have to do inspections. So that annual fee hopefully will help cover some of that extra time that those folks will have to put in. And also we need to have the absolute ability to revoke a license, shut down a foster home for violations of these duties. So if we tell you, you can have this many animals, honestly, I think we should build parameters of if you are cited or, the city has to call you however many times to tell you that the fecal matter is now piling up. These are going to be considered, not necessarily be written a ticket, they're going to be considered violations within the licensing of the foster homes or the fostering of these dogs. And that if that, once we reach a certain threshold, your license is going to be suspended. I just don't, we're just reached a point with that stuff too now where we don't have a choice. It's just kind of some unforeseeable things that have taken place. And it has risen to the level that actual police officers have had to been called on some situations. Things have escalated, and it's not fair to everyone around who has to deal with it. Kind of like what Chuck said. Your rights are I support your rights until they start to infringe on mine.
So I have a question.
Sure.
Are they not licensed through this? I mean, you
Pet
said
Act, they are.
earlier,
Yeah, they are. But basically, what happens with that is once they're licensed,
nobody,
and we did the research too, and actually looked into some particular foster homes, and they're like, yeah, they're licensed through us, and the shelter's licensed through the state. But they don't ever go on site to see if everything's okay or anything like that. I've never had any reports of them doing any kind of follow-up.
so do they allow these people to take any animals, or do they
They're not-
send those
They send
animals
their animals. So
So that should
XYZ
be-
XYZ shelter will send the fostering to ABC foster home, and they're not supposed to bring in any other animals. That's not always the case, and sometimes these folks will have their own animals there as well, and there's some conflicts and issues there as well. I know that all those animals that are brought in through the fostering program are supposed to be spayed or neutered. Now, we got another story with the animals that those people may own. Are they fostered? Are they spayed or neutered? So within there, we're going to probably have to address that on a local level. The Animal Pet Act is a good act, and it addresses not just fostering, but all sorts of different things. So it does address the fostering, but it doesn't really get down there. We're pretty wide out there. It doesn't really get down to the nuts and bolts of things. There's no mechanism in place to inspect to make sure that the home is still safe. It doesn't go in there to, look at, and I think of the situation too, where the house gets overrun by fostered dogs. What if there's kids in the home? And those kids now, not necessarily the biting the kids, that's a whole other issue, but maybe there's a health concern now in the home. Maybe, especially if things aren't being cleaned up or whatever it may be. So that Pet Act doesn't address that necessarily. That's going to have to be something that we're going to have to probably address on a local level. And I think we can address that as best we can through some kind of a licensing.
So these people that license these, do they not, they just keep sending dogs, and what happens to them?
They swap back and forth. So, I think in some situations, somebody may find one online and go, oh, I want to adopt that. So maybe that dog goes back to the shelter and is adopted, and then they send another one back. Since I'm not there all the time, I don't know how exactly they're going or how often they go back and forth, but that's generally what happens. Or they may foster for a certain period of time until, dogs will move from shelter to shelter as well. So it may be a rescue that's saying, hey, we're going to have to offload some of our, dogs to this shelter in Oklahoma to open up some spots. So we're going to take these 3 dogs out of your foster home, send them down there, but we're going to send 3 more back up. So it kind of becomes a revolving door of animals that, unfortunately, there's a reason sometimes that they're in these situations. So we don't know their temperament. Now, you don't necessarily ever really know the dog's temperament when you're getting, especially from a pound. I have a dog from a pound as well, but a lot of times there's some behavioral issues, especially when you get them all back into the house. So I think if we had, like I said, I'm not necessarily advocating for saying, no, we're not going to do this, period. At this point in time, if the licensing and, we're just revoking people's license left and right, then maybe we just need to look at a point where we say, we're just not going to allow this at this point in time. But we need to have some sort of enforcement mechanism in place. But then what follows with that is we have to enforce it. That has kind of been, and that's just not an issue here, it's an issue everywhere. You know, it's like, well, we've got all this stuff, but we're not enforcing it. We would have to not only enforce it, but I would recommend strongly enforcing it.
I think a lot of the problem, obviously the problem is, I think we can go through this one pretty quickly in a study session and follow some of the things that you're suggesting. And, there needs to be a limit on quantity, but I think there's a fine line between fostering and basically having your own animal shelter within the city limits.
Very true.
Which is really not acceptable. I'm a big supporter of animal shelters, but they need to be out in the way for the fairness of the animals as well as for the citizens of the town. But I think we can walk through this one pretty quickly, and I think we'll probably come to a consensus of what needs to be done. But it's definitely something needs to be done, because some people have a hard time taking care of 2 or 3 dogs, and then I don't know how people can take care of a lot more than that. But,
well, it allows us through a licensing program to look at what our goal has been, to look at essentially the quality of the owner as opposed to the breed of the dog.
Right.
And that will allow us to look at the quality of the foster home as opposed to the breed of the dog. So I think it would, and it may be one of those situations too. I mean, you decide to start fostering an animal, we find out you don't have them, you're not licensed through us, then you're not gonna, you're automatically shut down.
And I think what we said earlier about, as far as complaints about fecal matter, about barking, about, all those things, if complaints have been registered and they've been found valid, after a few of those or whatever, that's when that, the license goes.
Yeah, exactly. And, in some situations too, we're seeing that there have been enough complaints that they're recognizing that there's some issues. They're undermining different situations, a dog's being shipped out by a friend's coming by and grabbing a dog, after it's been attacked or whatever it may be. I mean, we've had situations where people come over and help before law enforcement show up, and we're going to have to, those things just need to be.
Some of it, I think, to me, it sounds suspect. It's like dog trafficking, and, seriously, and I think about the welfare of the animals and the neighbors more so than I do the people that own them.
Yeah, I think a lot of times these people's hearts are in the right place. It's just, they can't do it. Their heart's not big enough, or they don't have the time, and, I can appreciate it.
Their heart's bigger than their yard.
Yeah, exactly.
A foster animal is generally going to require more time and attention than a traditional animal will. So,
Well, just kind of think about it. I'm not, by no means am I comparing kids to animals, even though they act similar sometimes. You look at it kind of the same way as with foster children. They're going to have more attention. You need to have your home needs to be set up in a certain fashion, and people need to make sure that you're doing it right.
creature's integrity is compromised.
Yep,
Rehabilitated.
absolutely. Okay, sorry that took so long, but thank you for your time, and we'll just plan on a study session, and I'll get that prepared for you.
Everybody's looking at the clock. It's not.
I know, I looked at it too. I was like, how long did I take? And like, oh, it's not there, so everything's cool.
Okay. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you.
Action agenda. The 150th Celebration Committee purchases approval.
Mayor and Commissioners, you can see in your packet that we have a memo prepared to kind of describe some of the fundraisers that we want to do for the town's 150th celebration, the sesquicentennial, since we have us all trained very, very well on how to say that word. Sesquicentennial celebration happens throughout the year of 2021. We're actually starting in November this year with events and then continuing through Fall Fest of next year, with our biggest event being the opening of the time capsule and burying of a new time capsule on August 14th next year. In order to really make that a large celebration, we want to offer various activities in the park, including a family swim, a free meal of some kind, birthday cake, and ice cream, obviously, to really celebrate what's going on, along with a reenactment or a reading of the original ordinance that incorporated the city as a city. To cover those costs, we want to do various fundraisers, and list of fundraisers involves everything from Christmas ornaments to t-shirts, some travel mugs and glasses, window decals, and ice scrapers. So something that will span all price tags. One of the featured fundraisers that we also want to do is to purchase a bottle of whiskey, and that whiskey would then be bottled in commemorative bottles, 750 milliliter decanter bottles that have the 150th celebration logo on them. The lid would also have the 150th celebration logo on it, and could be auctioned or could be placed in the time capsule. Haven't completely decided exactly what's going to happen there. All of the other items also will be emblazoned with that 150th logo that Wildside created and designed for us, and the committee went through and selected and refined. And it does reflect the commemoration. I believe it's in your packet. You can see that it reflects our designation as the orphan train town with the railroad tracks, incorporates our logo, and references Concordia starting from in 1871 going through 2021. You can also see the calendar of events there. To do these fundraisers, we are going to have an investment. We're estimating up to $15,000. The sales of all of these items will recover that cost, plus make us somewhere between $3,500 and $4,000 that we need to hold all the events throughout next year. So this evening, we're looking for your authorization to proceed with these fundraisers and to spend that money from the general fund. We did work with legal counsel and understand that the use of general fund money for public purpose is legal to do. And this is couched as a public purpose because we are celebrating the town's 150th, and it is open access to everyone. Everything is public events and available to the public. So we are safe and legal in everything that we're doing. As Amber's confirmed that we've got sufficient funds available to be able to do this. So that is also a good thing, as we have to follow kids' cash basis. So we should be set to go with your authorization. Happy to answer any questions. We've got several members from the committee here tonight. If you'd like to ask questions of them as well. Stacy Smith and I are serving as the co-chairs of this committee. And it's been a really good committee so far. It's been a lot of fun. We're excited to get started. Are there any questions?
So do you really think selling all these things will generate enough money, or what if you don't sell them all?
I mean, we intend to sell them all, but we believe that we can. We've been able to partner with several retailers. So we're partnering with Cloud County Tourism as well as Brits Fountain and Gifts for all of the gift items. We'll have them out at certain points at times of the year, so there'll be new stuff coming out every few months or so. We've also partnered with both of our local retail liquor stores. They're both interested in selling about half those bottles. Well, they have to. We don't have the liquor license, or other retail partners don't, so they can't sell it either. So we have to partner with those folks as well. The details of that are still being worked out to make sure that we don't compromise their license. We want to make sure that everything is on the up and up. But we do believe that we can sell everything that's in there. Some items have minimum quantities, others don't, but we believe that we can do it over the course of a year.
I also think that if we can get close to covering costs, that there's a benefit in that if we can generate income. That's fantastic.
The goal is to cover 100% of the cost with fundraising. This is the goal.
Any other questions, discussion? Entertain a motion.
I move to approve the fundraisers presented to the city's sesquicentennial celebration and authorize related necessary expenditures from the general fund not to exceed a total of $15,000, with the understanding that all expenses for the 150th celebration will ultimately be supported by fundraising activities.
I have a motion from Christie. Do you have a second? Second from Keaton. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. So, whatever it's worth, the Jack Daniel's Distillery is actually in Lynchburg, Tennessee, which happens to be in a dry county, so they can't drink it. That's why they have to sell it.
Yeah, that's why they have to.
So they can't even do
Can't drink it.
stores there?
I think that they've worked it out where you can drink it there.
You have to drink it. You have to drink it at the brewery.
Obviously, I've never been there, so.
It's an agricultural process. I mean, just like making bread, except better.
Chuck doesn't know how to make bread, but he can do this.
Actually, I cannot do this because producing still squirrels is illegal.
The minutes for the September 16th, 2020 meeting.
I move to approve the minutes from the September 16th, 2020 meeting.
Second.
I have a motion.
Thank you, everyone.
Chuck. Thank you.
It's sesquicentennial.
Can you sing the song?
I'm working on that.
Okay. Do I have a motion?
Yeah, no, I seconded.
Got a motion from Chuck, a second from Christie. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Appropriation ordinance number 18.
What's it like to print check number 68466?
What stresses Amber out? What?
The bond payment, like I just wonder what it's like to write $1 million.
I actually did that as a hand check first so it could get sent sooner, so we weren't late, for sure not late. And I was like, I just wrote a $1 million check. It was pretty exciting. Your hand shake.
I move to approve appropriation ordinance number 18.
A motion from Marcia,
Second.
second from Keaton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Planning Commission appointments. We had 2. Everyone's gonna go.
Yeah, I'll go real quick. November 1st, LaDonna Pelletier and Troy Duke's terms on the planning commission will expire. Troy's decided he'll go again, but LaDonna, after she was one of the original members when I came, I think she served for over 25 years. But she hasn't, she decided not to renew. So we did get interest from Ken Anderson after I talked to him, because he applied to be on the board of building or board of zoning appeals. I talked him into getting on the planning commission. This will keep our planning commission full. So anyway, with that, I recommend we both of them. Troy to another term and Kent to his first term.
I move to approve Troy LeDuc and Arkin Anderson to the planning commission.
Second. I have a motion from Chuck, a second from Keaton. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. I have a question. Do we ever do, I know we'd be setting up a program or whatever, but do we ever do any kind of recognition for somebody that served for like 25 years or whatever?
I meant
You did
to,
it one
we
time.
have once, Larry Urey took it upon himself to honor Ted Samuelson for, I think he had served for 12, 15 years on the planning commission, and I can't remember what he did. He wrote a letter. I think he maybe even gave him a key of the city. I don't remember, but I just always thought, you know, Donna's been a very active and, you know, she's always involved. She always asks good questions and she got a lot of experience. She was always very helpful. And I always felt like somebody served a long time. It's a voluntary position, you know, they don't get paid anything. We have a meal every once in a while for having a study session, you know, we'll get some pizza for them or something, but typically, you know, they go out of their way. And, you know, sometimes there's some pretty controversial decisions they have to make. So, but yeah, I would like to have something like that. Maybe I meant to bring it up at the department head meeting this morning, but we got off on the other thing. I forgot about it. So,
All right. Board of Zoning Appeals appointments.
okay, this one's a little rare deal, and I must have dropped the ball on this one. Tammy Britt re-upped way back in January when the terms, but Cammie Thurmer decided not to again. And then when I was re-looking at the deal, I realized it had been out for a year. We hadn't met in that long. So anyway, I got expression. I thought this is the one Ken Anderson was he wanted to be on. So we got him as a member. That'll help replace Cammie, and then Tammy renew her term. And we'll show one member short on board of zoning appeals, and that's a pretty important board because it handles probably the most controversial issues, but it's very rare. But when they do meet, it'd be nice to have full membership. So I always encourage anybody out there that's interested in volunteering that.
Okay.
We get an expression of interest right online.
How often do you meet?
We're supposed to meet exactly annual. On here, I put that we meet on an as-needed basis. Whenever there's an application for a variance or an exception to the rule, which you can only ask for certain exceptions, but they're pretty rare, then we have to have a public hearing and meet. And then you're supposed to meet annually, like first part of the year, to kind of review rules and regulations and suggest any potential changes or amendments to the rules, or discuss any issues that may have maybe you know, if you had a controversial public hearing or something, maybe how we could treat it better, you know. You know, my first few public hearings probably weren't as clean and neatly run and as when you get some experience on how to deal with people when there are two different opinions in the room, strong opinions, so things like that.
Okay. No motion on the Board of Zoning Appeals.
I would move to approve Tammy Britt for another term and Art Kent Anderson to fill vacated positions on the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Have a motion from Keaton, a second from Marcia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bruno. Audit engagement letter, Amber.
Okay, the amount is 13,000, the same as it was last year. As I noted in there, we've never paid the full price due to having stuff prepared. And in fact, this last year it was $11,000, which was cheaper because they didn't even have to come here. We just sent them everything and did it remotely. So I don't know if they're gonna make that the plan going forward because it actually worked out really well, but $13,000 would be the maximum. We've had really good experience with them. They've been doing it for us since I've been here. So their first year is my first year.
The only question I have, and I've really appreciated, I guess this is just maybe more of a question of practicality. Is there any concern or risk with continuing to go with the same auditor for a significant period of time? Is there something where you should switch up every so often? I don't want to do that. I've been very pleased with their work. I feel like that there's positive engagement, so I don't want to change it. I
mean, that would be completely up to you, and I mean, it doesn't hurt that we could look around. I know that when they bid it out a long time ago, they were well below everyone else.
I don't
know that
benefit or need.
And it doesn't put us at a risk.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, the only thing would be if they were working with me and some, because otherwise, I mean, they're gonna, I mean, they have,
So if we're
standards.
good, I think it's
They have
fantastic.
ethical standards that have to be met in certain thresholds and stuff like that, so.
Right.
Yeah, there's, I think, I understand what you're getting at, like, you know, does it become too familiar, lackadaisical maybe, but no, they have all those special standards as accountants and auditors and stuff that they have to meet, so.
And they get different, I know every year they have different from, I believe, the state, things that they have to look at specifically, and it changes every year, so they're constantly looking at different.
Great.
They can only look at so many things. And
They usually have one or two new people on their team helping every year too, so it's different, but it's not the same people every time.
I would authorize the mayor to sign the audit agreement letter with Jared Gilmore and Phillips for the year ending December 31st, 2020, in the amount of $15,000.
Second. 13.
That's what the contract is. We may pay.
I said 15.
13.
Oh, 13, okay.
Huh?
I missed her.
I don't think so.
Okay, we got a motion from Chuck,
Question goes.
second from Keaton. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign.
I was also gonna note, I forgot that there is a spot in there that talks about the additional money for a audit of receipt of federal funds, and we'll probably have that this year, but it'll be something free to you, but that will probably happen. We're getting a lot of grants and everything else this year,
Yeah.
the airport and everything else.
And we thank you for your intense work.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Moving on to the next one.
Yeah,
wastewater.
the ordinance 2020-3166 utility fees.
We close on our bond tomorrow for $4,045,000. And that will cover all the construction costs on our wastewater treatment plant project. And with that final number and the estimates that we have so far, we've determined that we could add an additional $3 to the bill. So that would be $13 a month on the water bills, where originally, way back when, we thought it might be 15. So it's better than we first anticipated, but it is still adding a fee.
This is
So
going to be a net increase of $1.
we are going to take the pool fee off December bill, and this one will come on the
Right.
December bill. We'll just kind of swap, but go up a dollar. And they'll be in different places, so people will be able to see that the pool fee did come on.
I move to approve ordinance 2020-3166.
Have a motion from Marcia,
Second.
second from Christie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Thank you, Amber. Ordinance 2020-3167, snow routes.
We're really excited to note that the hospital is moving to the area on College Drive and near Dollar Tree and Walmart. And we've been looking at that College Drive for some time now and realizing there's a lot of traffic there, and it is a main thoroughfare off of the highway to get to the southwest part of town. And we believe that it should be added to the emergency snow route ordinance and signed as such. So tonight we're asking for your approval to add College Drive to that ordinance.
Move to approve ordinance 2020-3167.
Have a motion from Chuck. Second. Second from Keaton. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Ordinance 2020-3168, Uniform Public Defense Code.
I'm back, but this one won't take nearly as long. So every year they come out with new Uniform Public Offense Code and standard traffic offenses. I come to you guys every year about this time and ask for you guys to adopt the ordinance, which is essentially the same thing every year, except we just adopt that year's version of it. This year's tiny bit different. There's no changes made to the standard traffic offenses. So the new additions were actually not purchased. They're the exact same as the 2019 edition. So we didn't need to spend the money to buy those because we would just be having the same book, different cover. What we're doing here is we're just going to, it's still the same thing. So we don't need to come and ask for us to adopt the 2020. Because the problem is also when we do that, it ends up being a bunch of weird paperwork that has to be shoved into every single one of those ordinance books if we don't buy new ones. So we are essentially abiding by the 2020 because it's the same as the 2019. However, I am coming to you tonight to ask that we adopt the 2020 edition of the Uniform Public Offense Code because there were changes made in it this year. You'll see there's a few changes that have been made. Definitions of explosives were added. Section regarding selling, giving, or furnishing of cigarettes or tobacco products to a minor. I believe what that was is they tweaked it to vaping. Yeah. There's a typo corrected in 6.24, changes to the weapon code, and also violation of public health order. What we can do in these situations is if there's something that we want changed, that we can change, we also put into the ordinance whatever changes that we have made. We do that with the traffic offenses because we have some different things regarding the way enforcement of traffic offenses. So nothing is actually changed here that we do. So I would just ask you to adopt ordinance number 2020-3168, which is adopting the 2020 version of the Public Offense Code.
I move to approve ordinance 2020-3168.
Have a motion from Keaton.
Second.
Second from Chuck. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
No, it's too late, sorry.
Yeah. What are the changes to the weapons code?
I would have to look, I don't remember off the top of my head.
That's
Yeah,
fine.
I apologize. We can have a study session.
No.
Okay. I
just want to know.
Sure, yeah, okay.
Approval of commission room furniture donation.
Mayor and Commissioners, we've talked about this quite a bit, that we did receive some money from the county that received from Spark to get some new tables and chairs to improve our sanitation and support social distancing. Christy is sitting at one of the new tables. So that's kind of an example of what they'll look like. The tops do flip, so for those tables that need to be stored, they can be stored more compactly, which is helpful. Justin and Toby are sitting at 2 samples of the new chairs. How are they, guys? Comfortable?
Amazing.
All right, good. So they have plastic backs and either vinyl or plastic seats that will help for sanitation efforts. And they will replace the existing tables that you're at, as well as the gray fabric chairs. We have, since these assets are owned by the city, we have to dispose of them in a public manner. When Cloud Corp and the Chamber split offices, and they now have 2 separate offices, they split up their assets. And now Cloud Corp needs chairs, and the Chamber needs some tables and some additional chairs. So when they heard that we were getting new, they asked if they could have them, and I said I would talk to the commissioners about it and find out if that was acceptable or not to use. So tonight I'll ask for your approval to donate that furniture to them. I did also want to share with you that as we get the new tables and chairs, the new audio-visual equipment, the whole reason for this is to help support social distancing, which means that the dais is no longer needed. It would be important to us to go ahead and take that out of the space because now that becomes wasted space in the room. We've discussed it with staff and have decided that probably the most efficient use of that space on that side of the room is to build a storage room. As you can see, we have extra tables and chairs around the perimeter of this space, and it does make it hard to support and show people where they need to sit in an effort for social distancing. And so with creation of a storage room would allow us to put away the extra tables and chairs and really help to support that effort a little bit better. As we tear out the dais, we also know that we cannot match 25-year-old pink carpet. The dialogues do not match after 25 years, so we do intend to replace the carpet. We're putting new things up on the walls, new audiovisual equipment. We'll take down the screens and put up digital display monitors, TVs that will be able to help us support not only for commission meetings and broadcast and remote access if any of you or any of our staff members happen to be quarantined for some reason. It would also support the efforts of municipal court if they have somebody that needs to be, a defendant that needs to be seen by the judge, but we may not be able to get them from the jail here because we have to pay a law enforcement officer extra to bring somebody here then. They could be seen from the jail remotely. It also helps us have presentations and training for Dustin Navy, our bond counsel, for example, was on Zoom earlier, and you could tell that our existing audiovisual equipment didn't really support a remote presenter very well. This new setup will. So as we start to poke new holes in walls and take things down and leave old holes in the walls, it also makes sense to paint the walls. So those are our plans. We know that this room setup has served us well for the last 25 years that city operations have been in the city hall, but it will result in a bit of an update there. So those things are happening. So again, tonight, the action that we ask for you is to approve the donation of the tables and chairs as presented to both Cloud Corp and the Chamber to help meet their needs.
Any questions?
I move to authorize the donation of furniture to Cloud Corp and the Chamber of Commerce as presented.
Motion from Christie,
Second.
second from Marcia. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Managers report. Where do you think you're going?
This setup is very conducive to getting our steps in every day. Just a few things to report. One, the airport runway project began last week. Ron can help embellish a little bit, but so far we think it's off to a good start. We are going to be holding bi-weekly meetings this fall with the contractor and the engineers to make sure that everything is going smoothly. And that's gone very well. We did submit our first report for the CARES Act funding to get reimbursement from the county, so we expect those checks to be cut next week and returned to us. That amount was about $111,000 worth. So we'll still have a couple more reports due in November and December to get the rest of the remaining of the money coming back. And then my sticky note is over there. Oh, League Annual Conference is next week, and we will be, I plan to attend. It is 100% virtual, so there won't be any hotel room bills, no travel. We'll still be here in the office, and during sessions that we don't attend, we can still continue to work, so that's very, very helpful. We were also asked, Stacy and I were also asked to present during the League conference on a panel discussion of how we responded to the coronavirus, specifically how we transitioned so quickly over to virtual meetings. So that was very good foresight by this group back in 2011 to change everything over to iPads, because that helped tremendously. So really, really good there. And then finally, did attend the Brown Grand open house on Sunday. I hope you guys were all able to check out their new seats, but they looked tremendous. They looked very good, especially the lighting on the side of the seats as it lights the aisleways. Those look very, very good. That's all that I have for you tonight. Any questions? Thank you.
Thank you. Next, staff reports.
The airport out there, they started taking all the topsoil off and moving it. And now they're at a point where they've started laying some RC pipe out there. We've got about 150 foot of that laid. And they're starting to fill in the biggest low spot out there. They got to fill like 24 feet of it to bring it up to grade. So they got in about 3 foot of it now. Then it starts getting wider and bare. So they've got a lot of dirt to move. Well, so they have took off and got a good start on it so far. So,
Okay.
thanks.
Thanks, Ron. Marcia? Chuck? Okay. All right.
For right to executive session.
Yeah.
Just go for it. 20 minutes, you said?
Yes, please.
I move that the city commission recess into executive session for the preliminary discussion of acquisition of real estate, exception KSA 75-4319B6 with Amy Lang and Justin Farrell in attendance, and to reconvene in the city commission chamber at the DO5. So we'll just shoot for 7:10 p.m.
Okay.
Got a second?
I have a motion from Chuck, a second from Christie. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. No action was taken.
I move to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn from Chuck, second from Christie. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, same sign. Motion carries.